Raito is an ugly, pathetic loser who's more lifeless than an NPC. This changes when an extreme introvert develops a crush on him and lets him hit in secret. It all started when the new session begins, and Raito's determined to squeeze some Ri's into high school after winning the Darwin Award for ugliness 3 times in a row. After introducing himself to the class, he says hi to a cutie named Reina, but she finds him too ugly and unworthy of a response.
Emotional damage.
He doesn't give up, but even after a whole day of trying, Raito has no luck with her and decides to go harder the next day. He notices that Reina's petite figure could get him arrested, but since he's a sucker for lollies, he's determined to get a response. Her eraser falls to the floor and he picks it up for her, but she still doesn't acknowledge him. However, she walks straight up to him, and he thinks he's finally about to land his first kiss, but she just whispers some inaudible stuff. This makes him realize that she probably wasn't ignoring him the other day after all, and might just need speech therapy. She says that she forgot her textbook and sits beside him for the next class, and Raito is only trying to know whether this Lolita can consume his mini sausage. They have lunch together, though her appetite is disproportionate to her size. After lunch, she clings tightly to him and takes him bowling and to a karaoke bar, confusing Raito because after ignoring him for a whole day, they're suddenly besties. The next day though, Raito says hi, and she gives him the silent treatment like a typical bipolar. So he moves his desk nearer to her so they can share his book, and she narrates her story to him. In middle school, Reina had an issue with turning everyone into her bestie, even though they only knew each other for like 10 seconds. This creeped her classmates out, and she decided to prevent herself from making the same mistake in high school, which is basically why she now acts like a mute. She apologizes to Raito for the stress she's causing and hugs him until he climaxes. After school, Raito gets fed up with Reina's miming and decides to consume a shit in the books on how to communicate with a mute grandma. Still, this doesn't work out because she barely moves her mouth when she speaks, so he suggests that they use notes to communicate the nasty things they want to do to each other. But Raito finds that Reina is going to make his life a living hell with those, so he dumps the idea. He returns to the prehistoric era and comes up with a bunch of ways to communicate with her, but this flops and he eventually gives up. Reina appreciates his efforts and apologizes for being a disappointment, and Raito later finds that he has super hearing abilities, since for some reason he could hear Reina clearly and the sound of coins from a distance. They come across a crane game and Reina thinks it'll be a great idea to get a new toy, so Raito steps in to help her win. Forgetting that his luck is as tiny as his magical wand, he keeps trying and empties his wallet but still gets nothing. Reina, on the other hand, beckons for a stool because dwarf lives matter too. Then she surprises Raito when she basically packs half the dolls there and offers them to him. He thanks her, hands her one of the dolls, and then returns home with them. Since he's a big doofus of an older brother, he refuses to share with his sister and arranges them around his head like some juju practice. The next day at lunch, Reina gives Raito a lap dance, and Reina keeps dozing off in class, and Raito finds that she actually got up early in the morning to prepare breakfast for him because he'd been surviving on dog food since his mom went on a trip. The next morning, Reina shows up to class like she messed with the Yakuza. She takes out her frustrations on Raito and headbutts him, then explains that she actually went blind for a second and kept bumping into stuff on the road. He tries putting in some eye drops for her and then draws her face nearer to his, but she tells him to hold up because she wasn't ready to lose her virginity yet. Later, they get together for lunch and stuff gets into Rito's eyes, and while Reina tries to return the favor from earlier, he catches someone stalking them. This continues even as they move for the next class, and Raito notices they're being followed. Instantly, he figures that he probably also messed with the Yakuza and is about to pay for it with his life. Seeing his state of worry, Reina rests his head on her melons, but he tells her to stop that bees, because she's flatter than a drawing board. He eventually catches his stalker, who turns out to be a girl with enough milk to last a lifetime. Reina introduces the big girl as Oshiro, but when Raito opens his mouth to talk, she freaks out. Apparently she's Reina's childhood friend and is scared that Raito would prey on Reina. Reina says she likes it big and doesn't mind sharing, so Oshiro runs for her life, though she remains a creep. Later in class, Raito walks in with his zipper undone, and Reina is blown away by the size of his willy. She tries to let him know what's up, but the idiot can't take a cue. During lectures, Raito offers to solve an equation, but Reina saves him the embarrassment and tries to drop a hint on the board, which still doesn't work. The bozo still volunteers in their art class, so Reina tries to cover his sausage with an apple, because the pig-brained idiot is too dumb to know what's up. Reina basically spends the rest of the day covering his pickle for him. When he gets home, he eventually finds out that he spent the day advertising his shrunken willy, and is so embarrassed that he buries himself alive and skips lectures for a whole day. Meanwhile, Oshiro finds out that Reina is still in class even though classes are over, so she assumes it must be an issue with the rain, then throws her umbrella towards Reina. Reina finds that it's a bomb and goes FBI on it. Eventually, the umbrella finds its way back to Oshiro, and she drops it again for Reina, who gets more suspicious about it and locks it up. When Oshiro finds that Reina's onto her, she takes to her heels while Reina tries to catch up, but fails to activate the Usain Bolt power-up. Eventually, she corners Oshiro and is about to go Ted Bundy on her, but she instead hands out her own umbrella and they walk home together. Reina catches a cold, so Oshiro brings out a spare sweater and gives it to her. So Reina draws her closer and thanks her for the sweater. She also thanks her for always being a creep and following her everywhere she goes. And then Oshiro runs off feeling embarrassed that she wasn't as sleek as she thought after all. The next day, Reina decides to derive her hairstyle inspiration from Dr. Stone, and Radis is quite concerned that she's joined those scary goth girl bands, but she says that she woke up like this. Raito tries to fix this mess, but he only worsens the situation, so he asks Oshiro to step in. At first, he wonders why she's getting the style inspo from Beethoven, but she later changes it into a cute one, and Deacon offers to help him cut his afterwards. He's kinda scared that she'll turn him into a monk, but again, she surprises him and only makes his ugly haircut a bit easier to live with. She admits that she really intended to shave him bald because she's jealous of his relationship with Reina, but she mellowed down because of Reina. She's invited to lunch with the duo, but observes social distancing since she didn't get vaxxed. Reina shares her balls with them and Raito thinks she has gone nuts, so he asks what the matter is. Apparently, Reina's lips are cracked as heck, which is why she's been unable to give him some head. He hands her a lip balm, but she thinks it's lube and rubs it all over her face, so he grabs it and makes it even messier. Oshiro gets jealous as usual, but since this is her time to shine, she turns a simple job into a spa session. In class, Reina asks Raito for his notes because there's a useless lump of fat sitting in front of her, so he tries to find ways that'll make it easy for her. After failing at everything, like you, he figured that the easiest solution would be for Reina to sit closer to him. Just then, their teacher announces that they'll be rearranging their sitting position in the following week. Raito considers that this could be better for Reina, although it'll create some distance between them. For PE, his partner doesn't show up, and he's paired with Reina. Raito's the luckiest guy in the world, because he gets to put her in a million positions. Next up, they play baseball, and Reina's height gives them a clear win. Later, they move for a cookout, and Raito's meal looks like something straight out of Harry Potter. So Reina offers to take over and pulls off her MasterChef moves. At lunch, Reina tells Raito to suck on her balls, and when he does, he discovers that they're surprisingly bigger than his. Later, she starts moving like a paralytic and asks Raito to record her, but he goes on to daydream and assume that they're going to be Mr. Beast. Seeing that he's had 17 subscribers for the past 3 years, Raito finds that this could be the perfect opportunity to shine. After hours of practice, however, he's disappointed to find that all that torture was for a simple class exercise. He later goes to check on the video and finds that the algorithm is racist toward anime YouTubers. Much later, as they both prepare to have their sets changed, Raito reminisces on the good times and tells Reina to stay cool because they can still walk home together. However, at the end of the day, they remain in their current sitting positions, meaning they get to do more nasty stuff behind class. Later, the literature teacher, who's a fanatic of Shakespeare's depressing romance novels, walks in and begins tormenting the poor kids with her recital. The moment she catches a glimpse of Reina and Raito, she assumes they're flirting, but soon notices that Raito is only sharing his textbook with Reina. This makes her spiral into a string of delusive thoughts where she begins to worship their romantic relationship, and eventually she passes out from a cuteness overload. Later, Reina starts acting like she's been possessed by the devil, so she beckons for a bottle of water and says that she was choking on some meat. Raito figures that he needs to find a way to tell her what's bothering her because she could actually die on him someday, so he begins to teach her how to make better facial expressions. After taking her on an emotional roller coaster, they get into a starting contest, and she makes a funny face, which makes him burst out laughing. With this, Raito is satisfied that he's coached her enough, and there should definitely be some improvement in her facial expressions. But after comparing the before and after photos, he finds that he's been scammed. Later, they swing by a store to get some CDs, and Reina's eyes linger on some trap music. She listens to Eminem's diss tracks and shows up the next day with a microphone. Raito's surprised that this kid has turned into a rap god overnight, so he tries his luck on the mic, but it sounds like a toddler saying his first words. However, he gets a bit better after torturing his poor mom and sister with his dry bars. He returns to school and effortlessly communicates with Reina through rap, but after a while, it turns into an anime version of Kendrick versus Drake, though in their case, there's no clear winner. They plan to have another freestyle battle, but the school authorities ban them from using microphones, so the hip-hop era comes to an end. Later, Raito's sister gives him a spinning toy, and while he plays with it in school, Reina becomes interested and keeps performing tricks with it. Soon after, Reina becomes obsessed with the toy and starts acting like a meth addict, letting herself get lost in the game while other activities are going on. So Raito becomes concerned for her future and wonders if this is how she'll be behaving when he wives her up. Surprisingly, she stops and hands the toy over to him, but he inherits the obsession. Later, they chill at a park, and some cute puppies show up and scare the hell out of Raito, proving again that he might have the sausage, but Reina has more balls. Some little ones stop by and start hailing her like a mafia lord, because of how cool she was with the spinning thing. Raito steps in because Reina's not in their mood, but a little girl comes to distract the ringleader and tells him not to fall for Reina's charms, because she's using her Priyanka Chopra powers to seduce him. She then challenges Reina to a reverse game to determine who gets low-budget Justin Bieber. Raito tries first and gets totally whooped by the kids, so he places his hopes in Reina. But she also gets whooped, though she whispers that she intentionally let it slide. Little Missy feels good about flooring two adults, but her crush lets her know that it was clearly deliberate to help her save face. He tells her off and says he's gonna stick with his MILF. Then she bursts out crying and Reina knocks some sense into him, telling him to tender an apology to the young lady. Later, Reina becomes obsessed with some dumb monster game, and Raito challenges her to a battle. He chooses a giant monster called the Yankiras, which is 1,000,000 times larger than Reina's pathetic little doll. Raito attacks first, and Yankiras breathes out blue flames, giving Raito some confidence that he's totally trashed Reina's doll, but the little guy is shockingly standing in one piece due to a power-up that grants players immunity from monster attacks. When it's Reina's turn to attack, her tiny monster taps some power from black lightning and electrocutes the big guy until it's at level 1. Realizing how much he underestimated Reina and her dwarf doll, Raito puts on his game face and hopes for his monster to land the first strike, but the big-for-nothing stands like a helpless fool and gets defeated by Reina's doll, bringing it down to level 0. Raito realizes he's been scammed, so he doesn't fall for Reina's tricks again when she says she wants another battle. On their way home, he stops to wank in the restroom, and while Reina waits for him, the little girl from the park, Futaba, walks in to get a monster toy for her crush but gets jealous again when she sees the MILF sitting beside her. She tries to show off her skills as she attempts the crane game, but she fails so woefully and screams justice for Futaba because the game was rigged. She watches as Reina attempts her own turn on the machine, and to her greatest surprise, Reina actually does have some serious talent. Feeling challenged, Futaba decides to use her last penny after spotting a teddy in a really good position. To her, Reina is so dumb because it was right in front of her, and she could have picked it. So, Futaba taunts Reina when she finally wins the teddy, but on the way, she realizes that Reina had deliberately left the teddy at that spot, so she's still dumb anyway. After taking a huge dump, Raito returns to find Reina with so many dolls of game characters, so he just adds them to the cultist ring on his pillow, though this torments his sleep. After a while, Raito joins the BBW gang, and even Reina is disgusted at this look, but she knows he could die from knowing the truth, so she just shuts up about it. Besides, she realizes that she's probably responsible for Raito's obesity, so she picks up a book on dieting for dummies, and when the bozo notices this, he thinks she's the one struggling with body positivity. This inspires him to get fit, so he can find a healthier way to help her lose weight, and then he presents a good dieting book to Reina, only to find that she's not exactly interested in dieting. Later, the teacher announces that their exams will be coming up soon, and Raito wants to shit his pants because his previous result was as terrible as yours. To solve this, he turns to Reina for help, because even if he doubles his IQ, he'll still not match hers. They set out to study at the library but waste their time sending dirty texts to each other. So they headed to a pet cafe and later the park. But none of these provides an ideal location for them to study and finger each other, so they ended up returning to class, where they finally got to study. Later, they find that they're on cleaning duty with two of their classmates, and Reina looks like she's prepared to land on the moon, but she says she's just obsessed with cleaning. She gets into action and applies professional techniques that scare stupid Raito into thinking that she's the long-forgotten daughter of John Wack. Afterwards, her idiotic friends struggle to clean a simple stain off the floor, so she pours in a liquid mix, which gets the job done. Later, they move to rearrange the place, and since she likes big things, she proves that by attempting to lift a bookshelf that's twice her size. Unsurprisingly, this flops, and she almost gets isekai'd until Raito goes Superman at the nick of time. They resume studies, and she grabs his neck, urging him to prepare for 100 Shades of Grey, but leaves you hanging. Apparently, she's only thanking him for all he's been doing for her since they met. At the end, the bozo finally manages to rank in the middle of his class, which is obviously as high as his intelligence can ever go. Someday they go out to the pool, and while this would be a perfect opportunity for Reina to show off her milk sacks, she shows up in this disgusting swimming gear, obviously because even a blind man can tell how flat she is. However, Raito's into that kind of thing, so he urges her to take it off so he can climax for once. They get into swim, and Raito finds out that he almost unalived her because she can't swim, so he offers her some lessons, forgetting that he's the biggest failure on the planet. Ultimately, Oshiro saves the day again with her considerably large buns. After working on their swimming skills, Raito and Reina both compete against each other, and for the 1,000,000th time, he understands why his father abandoned him. They both attempt to play ping pong, and Raito's determined to prove that he's not a lost cause even after failing at literally everything. Feeling at ease that Reina sucks at it, he plays his secret power move and initially has the lead, but Reina figures his movements out and soon catches up. The final game is intense, and neither of them seems like they'll lose, so eventually it ends in a draw, and Raito proposes that they take on the world as a team, though quite frankly, she's only so good because Raito sucks at everything. As expected, he leads them to failure against the opposing team. Next up, Raito suggests that they go bowling to even the score, and secretly thinks that Reina's a bowling prodigy with god-level talent after seeing her carry a ball that's as heavy as her weight. Realizing that this could be his vantage point, Raito puts on his A game and waits to see her flunk. However, her moves are surprisingly good for a beginner, and when it's his turn, his dead luck messes things up for him as expected, leading to an eventual draw. He tries his luck again at basketball, and actually wins because Reina is more interested in kissing him than in winning this game. The idiot can't take a hint, so he urges her to team up with him against another pair the next day. Ultimately, they get their untalented butts whooped, and Raito accepts that they're no Olympic champions after all. On the walk home, Raito decides to play a zombie game and soon gets defeated, but Reina confirms that she's a member of the Assassin's Creed when she gives perfect headshots and even takes on the zombies with 2 hands, maintaining so much steeze as she does. Later, Reina excuses herself to use the bathroom, but Raito catches her attempting to play the crane game. However, his presence scares her, and for the first time in this anime, he sees Reina with an actual facial expression and thinks she's plagued with amnesia. He calms her down and helps her to win a toy, though he finds it surprising that she suddenly doesn't know how to play the game. They return to the same zombie game from before, and Reina fails so miserably, arousing more suspicion from Raito. After observing her strange behavior for a while, Raito concludes that she's a body double who has the real Reina locked up somewhere. While he confronts her, another Reina walks in, and Raito is convinced that she's got clones walking every street. However, he finds out that the lousy one is Reina's younger brother, who's obsessed with being a drag queen. Later, Raito catches a cold, and Reina tries to warm him up by hugging him, but he doesn't want anyone to call the cops on him, so he surrenders to prove his innocence. At lunchtime the following day, Reina finds that she forgot her lunch at home and passes out, then decides to get lunch from the school's cafe, convinced that this isn't a great idea because the students at the cafeteria are wild, hungry beasts who wouldn't mind feasting on Reina. Raito decides to follow behind and asks her what her game plan is. At first, she tries to use her body size to her advantage, but barely gets past the first few people when she gets kicked out. Knowing that the heavy-duty meals will be sold out soon, Raito places her on his neck and they easily shove through the crowd. However, when it's time to order, the weirdo can't be heard at all, so they pull back to re-strategize, but eventually Raito gets kicked out. Reina, though, refuses to accept defeat and goes into Catwoman mode, surfing over the hungry mob. But when it's time to place her order, she's still barely audible and is kicked out with a melon bun, which is quite frankly not going to sustain her appetite. Raito then trades his lunch with her, and on their way to eat, Reina's dog comes to the rescue, bringing Reina's forgotten lunch for her. She still insists on trading with Raito, and by the time he's done consuming the entire thing, he looks like he's definitely going to need that gastric bypass. Later, a classmate, Ishikawa, invites him for a card game, and while he's shuffling the cards, Raito feels confident in his secret strategy to win and believes he's Merlin. He tricks Sato into picking a card to make him end up with fewer cards, but before he knows it, Reina checks out, followed by the other two, leaving him as the loser. In the second round, he falls for Reina's bait and loses that too. In the third round, he loses again, and at this point, he has lost enough times to win a Guinness record. On the final try, the other two clock out, leaving Raito and Reina to compete squarely against each other. Raito thinks he's about to milk Las Vegas Drive, but he ends up picking up the Joker card, proving his stupidity to everyone yet again. When Reina is declared the winner, Raito confesses that he's never gonna trust a woman again in his life because she tricked him. Later, Reina snores throughout lectures and Raito wakes her up for the next class, but she doesn't move an inch, and the idiot thinks she's expressing her rebellion for school. It turns out that her body was numb from all the things she did with her dog last night, and again, Raito is disappointed that a dog beat him to it. He gives her some sort of piggyback ride to the next class, but she soon dozes off again and develops the same numbness. Raito takes her on his back again as he imagines how her drowsiness could affect his life, and how he'll be forced to carry her for life. He finds out that she was actually up all night, thinking about what he'll like to have for lunch, and this melts him inside. Meanwhile, Futaba is being delusional as usual as she plans to make the perfect meal to win her crush over. When she sees Reina holding a bento box, she assumes that she's yet again trying to steal her man, so she challenges her to see whose meal tastes better. When Raito and Reina have a bite of her meal, they find it to be surprisingly delicious, but when she tastes Reina's meal, she feels like a street vendor, comparing herself to Gordon Ramsay. She then humbles herself and asks Reina to teach her how to cook, and Reina agrees. Afterwards, she likes the taste of the food and wants to thank Reina, but she's terribly allergic to good manners, so instead she curses at Reina, saying she's just a stupid dwarf. Later, the students are given a project and allowed to pick whatever they like, so Raito and Reina start working on theirs. But Futaba barges in angrily, saying that her lunch gave the poor dude an upset tummy because Reina poisoned the meal to sabotage her. It turns out that the dumb girl saved that lunch from the other day for her date. Later, Raito and Reina come up with all sorts of ideas for the project, but they're just like Dumb and Dumber, so nothing works out. Eventually, though, Raito makes an ugly portrait of his hideous face and goes to check out Reina's progress. When he gets there, he finds her stiff and tries to shake her awake, but she just falls to the ground with no heartbeat or respiration. He immediately realizes that he could be locked up for the rest of his miserable life with dudes that love dudes, so he starts CPR. Just then, however, Reina walks in, confusing him, and then explains that she made a life-size doll of herself. To him, this is overkill, but he's too dumb to know that this is what genius looks like. Later, two other class teachers are having lunch on the rooftop when Reina and Raito walk in. And of course, Miss Tanbaru begins to obsess over them, as she's been doing the past few days. She even imagines them doing nasty things and massages her fountain of gladness with her crazy thoughts. She sees Oshiro peeking at them from the rooftop, and thinks her to be an enemy of their relationship. But when she finds that they're still nice and friendly to her despite her creepy ways, she just knows that they're having a threesome behind closed doors. Watching every action from Oshiro keeping a distance to getting fed by Reina with long chopsticks, Miss Tanbaru just knows that something is up, and when they move closer to sit with her, it all affirms it to her. They're role-playing mummy, daddy, and daughter under the guise of friendship. She can no longer take this, so she passes out again. Returning home, she retires to bed, but paints more mental scenarios of Reina and Raito's relationship, so that she can use to satisfy her desires. However, even the thought of them having a simple kiss makes her climax. She goes harder and imagines Raito as a trust fund baby he'll never be, while Reina's the poor, pathetic kid crushing on him like an atypical Wattpad story. Reina returns home to find the billionaire kid in her bathtub, and when he steps out, his huge dangling apparatus scare the heck out of her. This tortures Tanbaru so much that she climaxes even harder, losing so much blood that she passes out. The other teacher helps to clean her up and prepares a meal for her, while urging her to be careful, because her health is as unstable as her love life. In class, Ishikawa and Sato invite Reina and Raito to attend the fireworks festival, and then Oshiro is added as a third wheel. At the venue, the ladies show up in their beautiful yukatas, and Reina's look in particular makes Raito question whether he should still remain in the friend zone. When they later start out on the festival, Raito finds comfort in knowing that the food stalls won't be emptied without them getting anything to eat, all thanks to their athletic skills, excluding his, because they're non-existent. Surprisingly, Reina shows up with a ton of skillets because she just couldn't wait one more second before eating. Soon, she runs out of cash and Raito tries to help her win a toy but flops at it, while Oshiro steals the spotlight and gets the toy for her. Feeling grateful, Reina offers them her snacks and stuffs them into their mouths. They head to a goldfish tank, and Reina tries her luck at scooping up goldfish, but even after Raito hypes her up, she makes a mess out of it. Later, Tanbaru and the other teachers swing by the festival, and when she lays her eyes on the trio, she passes out again. Later, Raito finds out that he's not holding Reina but Futaba, who mistook him for her dad. He panics, realizing that Reina's lost, and he also finds that Oshiro is nowhere to be found either. At the same time, though separated from each other, Raito and Reina find out that they're lost. and Futaba starts screaming something about reporting into the cops for forcing her to call him daddy, though he reminds her that she did think he was her daddy. He drops her off at the front desk and reaches out to her dad, then he turns to leave. But she starts blackmailing him with her attachment issues, and he's forced to wait till her dad comes to pick her up. Next, Raito turns to search for the others and finds that Reina was right at the same spot with him. So she hugs him tight and thanks him for coming to pick her up. They rush to watch the fireworks, and when Reina says she can't see, Raito places her on his neck, earning her gratitude that it'll be the first time she'll be watching them. Afterwards, Raito extends his hand to her, and she shyly hesitates, eventually giving in with a blush. The next day, Reina walks in to find Raito complaining about a fever, but somehow he's glowed up and has this alpha male energy around him. It turns out he looks that way to the others too, and even shows off his abs to his teacher, causing her to pass out. Soon after though, Raito passes out flat on the floor and his friends hustle to take care of him, but he chooses to rest at home instead. When he gets home, his sister is also feeling his steez and comes to check up on him the next day. But when she sees that he's back to normal, she turns away like there was only air in the room. When he resumes school, the others also treat him like garbage, and then he notices that Reina is absent from class. The teacher hands him Reina's homework, and on his way to her place, he sees a large-sized version of her wielding a sword, and all his dumb doofus brain can think of is that the girl before him is Reina from the future, and is a cold-blooded assassin. Just then the girl walks up to him, wondering why he's been ogling at her. He then finds that she's not Reina but her younger sister Aru, who was only testing the knife to chop up some sausage. He gives her Reina's homework, but she barks at him and tells him to hand it over in person. He then asks for ideas on what Reina would like to have, and she helps him shop for them, but also shows him a limited edition of some teddies that Reina would love to have. She struggles with the claw machine but has no success with it until Rito steps in. Afterwards, he hands over the teddy bear and he tells her that Reina would also be pleased to receive a present from her. But she sadly mutters something about never being number one in Reina's life, despite all her care for her. Later, Raito shows up at Reina's house with everything he got, though he tells her that they were all her sister's ideas. To show her appreciation, Reina hugs her sister, who, feeling shy, invites Raito into the house. In the kitchen, Raito appreciates Aru's effortless kitchen skills, and she tells him that she's always taking care of Reina, because she's not sure for how long she can keep it up. Generally, one would think that she's got a few years left to live, but she clarifies that she actually means that they'll soon become adults, and it'll be harder for her to take good care of Reina. Next, she asks Raito what he thinks of Reina, but the idiot can't tell her that they're friends with benefits, so he just mumbles the word classmate. Era says that Reina talks about him endlessly, and he's lucky to have a good personality, despite his disgusting face. Otherwise, she'll turn his sausage into shredded beef. After preparing the meal, he decides to head home, and the siblings gossip about him at dinner. Afterwards, Ru tells her younger brother that she's noticed how Reina's eyes light up when she's talking to Rito, suggesting that she's probably fallen in love with him. The boy has no issues because he thinks Raito is cool, but Aru is dead to understand if she's comfortable seeing her doll-sized sister hang around an obvious creep. The next day, Ren bumps into Rito and asks him to join him as he goes shopping. At the supermarket, Ren tells Raito that he wishes for a big brother like him, but then realizes that he lost the wallet containing the money he was supposed to pay. Raito says he'll cover for him, forgetting that he's a poverty-stricken fool who's still living with his mom. Ren says he'll find a way to pay without the wallet, and Raito becomes concerned that he wants to use a credit card, knowing it could rack him up more debt than college students. However, Ren only meant that he would return his snacks and pay for the groceries using his personal allowance. They ask the saleswoman if she'd come across any missing wallets, and she says no. So they both rush out to get it and find Reina's dog waiting outside with the wallet. Ren asks Raito if he's plowing his sister, but she shows up and he just shuts up. Reina thanks him for taking care of Ren, and for the first time, he addresses her by her name, causing her to blush heavily. Later, Ishikawa invites Raito and Reina to go camping in the hills, and Reina seems excited about it. But on the scheduled day, she's nowhere to be found. Raito panics, thinking she's still fast asleep, but finds that she was struggling with a bag twice her size. Their teacher gives them a ride to the venue with a cheerful smile, but for some reason, she drives like a psychopath and probably just wants to get rid of the damn kids. Luckily, they make it out alive and set up their tents. Then they ask Reina if she brought the ingredients, which was her own responsibility. She's pretty sure she packed it up, but finds out that she didn't and is disappointed. So Rito cheers her up and says that he has an idea. He walks up to the manager and seeks his permission to source some edible plants from the woods. And after collecting them, he goes to hunt for fish with a spear, thinking he's Encino Man. As always expected of the failure, the idiot lets the fish get away, and Oshiro again comes to the rescue. While she's aiming the spear, Rido's intrusive thoughts kick in, and he thinks she's going to stab him to death, but she just gets the fish. He expresses his fears from earlier, and she confesses that she wouldn't have hesitated to skewer him with the fish. But she realizes from Reina's mood that he's a good guy who makes her feel good. They gather enough food and share some with the manager, then sit down to enjoy a relaxing meal. At night, they play a game of cards and Oshiro retires early to bed. The rest of them take a walk in the woods and Ishikawa whispers to Sato that they should sneak away so he can moisturize her face with his cream.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
Leaving Reina and Rido alone. Realizing that these two snuck off, Rido decides that they should gaze at the stars, and for a while, Reina stares into Rido's eyes with hers filled with love, while Rido stares back with no strings attached. She's about to tell him how she feels about him, but suddenly, a wild dog comes out of the woods and charges at them. So Rido steps in front of Reina, but the animal just plunges straight at Reina and starts licking her because he hasn't gotten some for the whole day. Apparently, he brought the ingredients she forgot at home, so she pats him for being a good dog, and they all retire for the night. Later, Oshiro wakes up and finds that Reina's having trouble falling asleep, so she moves into the same sleeping bag with her. Afterwards, Reina shares that she needs tips on how to confess her feelings for Oshiro, because she chickened out when she had her chance earlier. Oshiro urges her not to give up, and when Rido steps out for a meal, she encourages her to make her move. Before Reina leaves, Oshiro stares into her eyes and is probably about to confess that she's crushing on her, but she chickens out and lets her go. Reina joins Rido for some ramen, but Reina soon feels cold afterwards, so Rido keeps her warm with his jacket. Reina begins her confession again, but Rido messes everything up when he talks about how much he enjoys the friend zone. She gets up with a look of disappointment and, with tears in her eyes, kisses him before running off to bed. The next day, Reina shows up looking like she's in need of gastric bypass surgery, and all her idiotic friend can think of is that she's preparing to be a sumo wrestler. It turns out that she was just cold and put on extra layers of clothing to protect herself, so Rido helps her get rid of the extra clothing, leaving her buried beneath the pile. The other friends watch as he offers to keep her warm and anticipate that the two will cuddle with each other. But typical Rido gets them jogging around school and setting up a fire. Ishikawa expresses his disappointment at the fact that the two didn't seize the opportunity to get some, even after giving them some time off to themselves, and Oshiro agrees with him, though she knows better. After a while, winter approaches and Rido is almost shivering to death when he discovers a giant snowman behind him and assumes that the apocalypse has begun. However, he finds that it's just another one of Reina's little experiments, and she invites him in. Rido's surprised to see an entire setup within, and even more so because Reina gets into a maid costume and hands him a menu to her shock Igloo Cafe. He makes his choice, and she immediately gets to work, fixing a short breakfast for him before they head to class. After classes, however, they find that their structure has crumbled. So Rido, in an attempt to keep her spirits high, suggests that they rebuild the igloo. This goes down in the worst way possible, and they end up with some sort of dumb dragon head instead. After playing in the snow for so long, Reina begins to shiver and Rido places her hands in his, leading her to blush at his kind gesture. They walk to school the next day and Reina's walking like a malfunctioning AI robot due to all the excess construction she's been doing, so Rido suggests that they head to the nurse's office. They find no one there, so Rido takes matters into his own hands and stretches her on his back, but she begs him to stretch her till she's at her limit. By the time he's done with her, she's completely stretched out, so she offers to massage him in return, but her hands are so small that he can barely feel anything. She then proceeds to step on his back and he eventually falls asleep. Overcome by her feelings, Reina bends to kiss him, but the nurse barges in and ruins the moment, saying they should be back in class. Later, Ishikawa invites them on another one of his crazy adventures, and Reina wishes for Oshiro to come along, but she's not in her usual hiding place. On the way, Reina gets hungry, and they head to a restaurant. After she's had her fill, she looks like a hot air balloon and falls fast asleep. Rido takes a bathroom break, and the remaining two get gossiping about him and Reina's unclear relationship, and say that they're an unusual couple. Somehow, though, the conversation leads to Sato saying that she has a thing for Ishikawa, and he reciprocates the energy. Then Rido returns and Reina wakes up. The next day, Reina picks up an outfit for her one-sided date at the mall with Rido, and while Rido waits for her, he thinks she's headed to the mall because she wants to participate in a spinning burst tournament and that she's been up all nights strategizing to win the game. She, however, shows up in a basic outfit and goes about chowing down anything and everything she sees. So Rido theorizes that she's a secret hotel tycoon and is trying to sample what cuisine the tourists might prefer. She then interrupts his thoughts, saying that she's going to prepare a grandiose dinner for the New Year's celebration. She confirms if he likes crabs and purchases them. Then they go on to do their usual activities at the mall. Later, Futaba and Akun join them, and Futaba, in her delusional ways, says she's on a date with him, but he outright denies her creepy stalking self. Noticing that Reina's clung tight to Rado, Futaba suspects that they might be dating, but she prefers to mind her business and shuts up about it. Akun gets jealous and asks Rado why the heck he's always following Reina around like the bodyguard that always ends up servicing his female boss. He then challenges him to join the spinning tournament so they can compete in the final round, but in like 5 seconds, they get kicked out of the competition and barely make it past the prelims. However, Reina wins the tournament and confirms that she was actually up all night, pulling herself together for the big day. She also points to the ladies section, where Futaba wins, and this gets Akun's attention, so he asks her to give him up close and personal tutorials. Before leaving, Futaba tells them to have fun on their date, but Raido in his snail brain says they're just having fun. Futaba tells the big fool that they're definitely on a date, and Reins blushes so hard that she creates a new shade of pink. When they get to school, Reina shares a fancy meal she prepared as a sample of what's to come on New Year's, but notices that Oshiro hasn't been hanging around as usual. Reina keeps looking in strange places, and it turns out that Oshiro is just getting better at hiding by the minute. Raido becomes worried that Reina's attention has been elsewhere throughout, so he becomes suspicious and runs away. Oshiro finally comes out and asks Reina whether she's now dating Raido, and when she says no, Oshiro takes off, preparing to crush Raido's sacks for breaking Reina's heart. She challenges Raido to a duel and activates her inner Viking, so he surrenders to her torture. However, she pulls out a reverse game and states that the loser must do the winner's bidding. When they start the game, she warns him ahead of time that if she wins, he's dead. Raido plans to make that plan fail, but before he knows it, Oshiro has already dominated the corners. She apparently hasn't ever lost to anyone, not even when she played against Reina in their childhood. Back then, Oshiro was Reina's neighbor, and she loved how cutely sized Reina was. The friendship strengthened as they shared with each other, and it got even stronger after Reina buried herself underneath a bookshelf and Oshiro came to her rescue. Back in class, Reina finds out that Raido is missing and goes out to search for him. On her way, she finds Oshiro's hairpin and figures that stuff is definitely going down. At the game, Oshiro becomes teary-eyed and says that if she wins, Raido should stay away from Reina if he won't share the feelings she has for him. He becomes challenged and refuses to lose to her, then goes on to win the game at the dying minute. He tells her that what really happened that night was that he confessed his feelings for Reina. Oshiro's surprised, but Reina blushes hard and apologizes to Oshiro for not explaining things clearly. Apparently, after Raido confessed his feelings for her, Reina got in her feelings and shed happy tears. She then kissed him, but freaked out because she thought she had messed things up again. Oshiro, realizing that she was unnecessarily hard on Raido, immediately apologizes, and Reina confesses that she likes Raido too. From the bushes, the foolish couple springs out and celebrates because finally, Raido and Reina have graduated from being just friends with benefits. Oshiro remembers her feelings for Reina and becomes teary-eyed, and Reina looks back at her with a smile on her face, and they have a group hug. It's the last day of lectures and Raido comes to pick Reina up, but she says she has an urgent matter to attend to and leaves him hanging. He begins to overthink it and thinks that they're losing their spice, but he sees her watering some plants that may be cassava, so he assumes that she's about to become Japan's boba champion. He quickly jumps into the garden and offers to help her on her quest. It turns out that the plants weren't cassava plants, but lupinus flowers. The next day, Reina invites Raido to a secret place where they can do their thing, but he finds out that she scammed him and just wants to give him tea. He goes deep in his head again, thinking she knows that he's been secretly taking his teacher to Cloud 9, but she just wanted to have a tea party and has sent everyone invites. As they appreciate the cherry blossom, Reina runs out and Raido runs after her, thinking something went wrong. She expresses how grateful she is that she didn't end up being lonely in her first year of high school, and that was why she hosted the tea party. She hugs him, saying that she's scared that they won't end up in the same class, but he assures her that he'll be there whenever she needs him. Besides, they have a community of friends to rely on, so they'll never be alone. If you think Miss Tanbaru is into Raido, type "I love mummies" in the comments section, and if you like anime recaps, watch this video.